Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to my podcast, Don't Get a Therapist Yet. And today I'm very pleased and excited to have a very special guest. Her name is Cathy Himlin, and she has many, many roles and massive experience. She is a marriage and family therapist. She's a licensed professional clinical counselor. She's an author, a speaker, and does consulting in very many ways. So, a very warm welcome to you, Cathy, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on my show.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Perhaps we can start by just telling the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, as you said, I am a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional clinical counselor. And what I specialize in right now is working with kiddos and their families, especially for parents who have kids who don't want to see them or too scared to see them. So my role is to help to find a way to repair that relationship between the parent and the child in high conflict family law cases.
Mm.
And so that's mostly what I do. We see some kids, some adults, and I do a lot of parenting support. So I have another company so I can work across the country and in other countries where I can do parenting support. If people sign up with me, I have a parenting class that's targeted on high conflict divorce and especially the parent who isn't seeing their kid recently or feels like that's about to happen. Um, and those are the two big things that I do. And I also consult with attorneys to help them with child-centered family law. I do trainings and I have different workshops and things for that, and also workshops for therapists so they can understand, there's a lot of special and unique dynamics in
Mhm.
family law and especially high conflict cases. So I have some trainings to understand that, all based on child-centered and developmentally
Mm.
sound criteria that I go through so they understand, it's not just about the fighting and who wants to have custody. We really need to take a look at what's in the best interest of the child in that moment. So
Mm.
that's in a nutshell what I do.
In a nutshell, that's a lot,
A big
and
nut.
a huge amount. And you have written this amazing book called The Rejected Parent. Why did you? Can you tell us a little bit more about why you decided to write this book?
Yes, I was starting to do parenting classes across, the United States, and I realized it's difficult to get people to show up at the same time across different time zones. And I really wanted to reach to those parents that feel alone in this,
Mm.
that feel like they're just so dejected and they want to give up. And I based my book on my parenting class actually and expanded it
Mm.
so that if you read it, you'll get a lot of what you get out of my parenting class. And I wanted to help parents who maybe couldn't afford to purchase a parenting class or see me individually to get the same information or very similar information that I give my people in the parenting class and in consultation. I just wanted to reach a bigger group because I know this is sort of these parents, I heard someone say it like this once. It wasn't, I didn't coin this, that they're suffering in silence. So parents who consider themselves rejected or kicked to the side and they haven't seen their kid in, weeks, months, or years, they don't get the support because there's not a lot of training on
No.
this, not especially for family law cases for kids that are under 18. I know there's a whole bunch of literature and services for people who are adult children and parents who are getting their adult children rejecting them, but there really wasn't anything. I looked,
Mm.
there wasn't another book like this. So
No.
I really wanted to get that resource out there for people.
Mm. And it's an amazing resource, and it's written with such
Thank you.
wisdom, experience, but very practical as well. It's really, there's lots of exercises a person can do, and really looking from the child's perspective and understanding more about, why the child might be behaving in a certain way. So I love it was so good and so needed as well, because there's so many parents out there who I think are really suffering from not seeing their children and a loss. Like you say, what do they do? They don't know how to, they don't know how to repair the relationship. I think is the whole point of your book, isn't it? It's how to get back and start that emotional relationship again with their children as much as they can. Yeah,
Exactly.
very
And
good.
there's can I speak to the loss a little bit? The loss
Of course,
at all?
you speak.
Yeah, the loss, I talk about this in the book too, but
Yeah.
the loss that I see parents suffering,
Mm,
it's as if you've lost a child literally to death, except they're still alive. And
mm,
you can't grieve and move on. Not that anyone ever moves on after losing a child,
yeah.
if a child passes before a parent. But to have a living child that won't
Yeah.
see you, the grieving process is very complicated
Yeah.
and it's very difficult because
Yeah.
it's always there. You just, how can you get to your child again? Like
Yeah.
that's your baby.
Yeah.
And so it's so painful. The
Mm,
grief that parents go through is awful. It's just
mm,
awful.
yeah. And although, child grief is terrible and absolutely awful, this is kind of like, because you've always got that with what if only, you've got that potential seeing that child, haven't you? But and then it's not happening. So that grief is actually very intense, isn't it? To know that there is possible you could see your child, but then you can't.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's just hard on them. It's yeah.
Yeah. Very, very
There's
hard.
no peace in that at
No,
all.
no, no. Very hard. As a therapist myself, I've met many a person who has been estranged from their children, and the pain that they've shared and everything is awful. But now I've got a book I can recommend to them as well, so there's some hope there. Um, and would you mind describing what you mean by parental alienation? How it's different from a child simply being close to one parent after divorce or custody dispute. What's the kind of difference with this parental alienation? Can you start with that?
Sure. And I don't even know, I may mention it once in my book because the point was to help these parents that are being rejected to understand that this is not what's going on all the time. There could be a piece of that. So what it is for, I don't have like a formal definition, so I'm just going to paraphrase all the
Yeah.
literature I've read, is that it can be an unintentional or intentional behavior that the parent who is currently having custody of the child or has more custody or is a primary caretaker is doing or saying things to block contact with the parent. That's more gatekeeping, but block
Mm,
contact or encourage the child not to see the other parent or to set up a scenario where the child becomes afraid to see the other parent
mm,
and fills their head full of adult stuff.
yeah.
That can be intentional or, like I said, unintentional. And the unintentional piece that a lot of parents, there's a nuance to this that there could be a custodial parent, for instance, that is very anxious and has their own childhood trauma or their own trauma with their parents going through a divorce. And so they're feeling all this anxiety. Parents go through this trauma anyways response in divorce a lot of times because your family's being ripped apart, your kids are being split up, and it's just and there's fighting in the courtroom usually or a lot of the times, and the litigation just keeps us, the whole system in a trauma mode, so to speak, and not to use that word so lightly. But when parents are all, activated and dysregulated and their emotions are like all over the place and they
Mm,
can't get peace and grounding in them, this parent over here that's the custodial parent has anxiety and that anxiety is contagious.
mm,
And so sometimes they inadvertently alienate the child from the parent. Like
mm,
the child may come back and say, "Hey, I'm a little upset that mom or dad didn't make breakfast the same way or something like that, and I don't feel good. My stomach hurts." Or they may say, "I'm a little nervous being over here at this other parent's house." And then this parent over here will say, "Oh my gosh, really? Okay, well, here's a watch, and maybe you can call me if you feel like you're scared." Things like that.
mm,
And that right there gives the message to the child that there's something wrong with the other house.
mm,
Now, this parent may not really mean to do that,
mm,
but they're scared that there's something wrong because the trust has been broken between these two parents.
mm,
So we've got the ones that do it on purpose because they want the
mm,
child for whatever reason. There's a lot of mental health things going on here when that happens.
yeah.
And then the ones that do it by accident. It's not black and white. And so that's
Mm,
part of the book is I want the parent who's being rejected to understand they're
mm,
doing some things to reject the parent. I mean, to reject the child. They're doing some things that might be pushing their child
yeah.
away. So that's more of what parental alienation is. And then sometimes kids do these things on their own. They think developmentally, even through teenage years,
Mm,
I would argue even up through adult years for some people, they think in black and white. So one person is right and one person is wrong. So if one person's right, one person's wrong, that means we got two parents. We've got a bad parent and a good
Mm.
parent. I've seen parents where there's no alienation happening, but accusations of it is happening, and it's the kid that's deciding this.
Yeah.
Or maybe the kid doesn't want to go to the other parent's house because they don't like going back and forth. They
Yeah.
don't want two sets of stuffies
Mm.
that for their better. They don't want two desks to do their homework on. Or better yet, they don't want to miss out on playing with their neighborhood friends
Mm.
or hanging out, or going to the school that they want to go to.
Mm.
And it's so complex. So the book, not to like talk about the book all the time, but I mean the book like
Mm.
fleshes that out
Yeah.
and talks about all the reasons from a kid's reasoning, the custodial parent reasoning, and the parent who doesn't have custody right now.
Mm. And it's
If that
really good
answered that.
to see that in the book, how that sort of played out as well. And I think you say it's much more complex than it seems. I think was one of the phrases I picked up. And just actually knowing that, and because you're so experienced in this area, just bringing that experience to these peoples, it gives them a hope that they can work with it because they can understand a little bit more about the complexity of why a child might suddenly not want to go and see them and everything like that. It's really good. And you also mentioned sometimes what can happen is a child can reject a parent entirely. So what might be some of the most common reasons that might happen? And I know you've been working here for 30 years in your practice, if that's correct.
Right.
So what would be sort of typical common reasons why they get rejected entirely?
Entirely. You know, again, there's a lot of it starts with, I don't want to go to two homes. It starts with little things. So if you've
Mm.
got a kiddo saying things like that, you need it in a therapy immediately because there's a way to make that easier for them, the transitions. It may be that here's a really good one. Besides the ones I've already mentioned, when you've got a primary caretaker and the other parent works outside the home,
Mm.
and then this kid, even teenage, is used to having this primary caretaker do everything with them, like pick up from school, drop off to school, do homework with them, tuck them in at night, give them a bath, or, get them to do their homework or whatever. Like I said, or take them to activities. They're used to that routine.
Mm.
And when a court comes in or parents in mediation come in and just abruptly change custody, when you look, and I have a chapter in there, I do a little math. Sorry, I do some simple math where you've got a custodial parent, or I keep calling them custodial because both parents could have custody and this still could be happening. The primary caretaker maybe has that kid access to that kiddo 80% of the time compared to
Mm.
20% of the parent that works outside the
Mm.
home, including the weekends. But if you just look at Monday through Friday, they have 80%, 20%, something like that. And I don't mean custody schedules. I mean just time they spend with this child, access to this child, depending on their age,
Mm.
even more if it's an underage kid that's not even in school yet. So this child's used to that and they don't want it to change. And it depends on the child's diagnosis. If they have one, like a kid on the spectrum is going to be harder to change their routine, for instance. Um, and it depends on their temperament and the relationship they had with this parent.
Mm.
And I have seen cases where there really wasn't alienation and they've just gone to, I want to stay in the same school. I want to stay in the family home. I don't want to leave this place. And as I said earlier, I don't want another set of whatever. I just want to stay here. And if this parent over here gets upset because they feel entitled to 50% of time with the child, and then they start shaming this child, threatening this child, saying they'll take away birthday presents or Christmas presents or whatever, or their allowance, or they're going to kill their bank account they had given them. I've seen that happen before. This child goes, I'm out. Then
Mm.
you stay over here and I'm staying here. And that's when a child can just fully push back and say, I'm not putting up with this.
Yeah.
I'm happy where I'm at. You make me uncomfortable. And that's that.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
this could have nothing to do with the primary caretaker. So I've seen full rejections happen over just that, simply
Small
that.
things. Yeah, it's amazing.
Then there's abuse and domestic violence and substance use. Of course, those make it even harder.
Mm.
And the parent has to overcome even more to gain the trust back of this child,
Mm.
right? But I've seen even some of those cases come out better than the ones where you've got a parent who is pushing and threatening and guilt tripping and pulling a power thing. I'm the parent, I'm
Mm,
entitled to you, as if they're a piece of property.
mm,
That doesn't work that way. We
mm.
have to try to get at the child's point of
Yeah,
view. Otherwise, you're going to end up, especially if you're dealing with a teenager, that is developmentally the time for them to push back on parents. So
yeah.
it's really tough when they're over 12.
Yes.
Really tough
Yeah,
sometimes.
absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And you've explained that very well. And you can really see how that can happen, like you say. And then the other parent is sort of like pushing or coercing and demanding. And I think you say that in the book. And that's where it just gets much worse, doesn't it? Because the child doesn't respond well to that, do they? They feel pressured or coerced. Okay, that's good. And I think you also say that, often children take sides with one parent um, when there's two households. So psychologically, what do you think the child is going through when that happens? So what goes through their mind when that split happens?
It really depends on the reason for it. There's a lot of different reasons. One time, I can think of a couple. One is when the child is inadvertently being exposed to court material or custody paperwork or declarations from a parent to another, or emails or texts or something on a co-parenting app or something happens. And when they start getting exposed to that, they're going to go into that black and white, one parent's wrong or right, and they're going to just go straight in and side with the one they think is right. So that's a real simple one that happens.
Hmm.
It's avoidable, right? If both parents could just protect the children. And I mean, even don't even tell your kids when the court date is. They don't even need to know. They really should be living their life without even knowing court exists. I mean, when I go in, and I'll say another example just to say this, when I go in and start a new case or work with a new family and I'm doing an intake on a kiddo, I don't even say that this is a court case when I'm working with them. My first words out of my mouth are, do you know why you're here? Well, I'm here to help you with your relationship with your parent. That's why I'm here. If they don't know, I don't talk about a judge and court and custody and blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. Not at all. But if they already know it,
Hmm.
then that's a problem. Because if they're already being exposed to it, it can be a big problem because then they take on that responsibility and
Yeah.
then they feel like they need to fight with another parent, right?
Mm.
So that's something that happens. And another thing, when they side with another parent, well, there's a couple of more reasons if you want me to tell you a couple more. Um, there's more than this. It's like I said, it's complicated and it really depends on the situation. When
Mm.
you have like a primary caretaker or the parent, not even primary caretaker, but the parent who is like ill or is maybe crying a lot or depressed or anxious, and they feel like they need to caretake that parent, or they feel like that parent may die if they're not there, so or something bad's going to happen if they're not there. I hear that a lot, that
Mm.
they need to stay with this parent because if they don't, or if they don't call them all the time, something bad's going to happen. And so that'll pull them to that parent because they are literally caught up in some sort of loop with this parent that's pretty unhealthy, of either caretaking that parent or worrying literally about death with this parent. And they'll just sit there because they love this parent, but they're afraid to leave this one more than they love this one. And they know this one's okay. So they know they don't need to be there, they just need to be here. So they take on this role
Mm.
of being a guardian, so to
Mm.
speak, or watching over a parent. So those are a couple of reasons. And another reason that they'll take a side that I've seen, and again, I keep saying it's so complex, there's so many reasons,
Mm.
is let's say one of the parents is a little bit more aggressive is maybe not the right word, but we'll just use the word aggressive. There's someone who yells, criticizes, threatens. They have control the household. Maybe coercive control would be a good phrase of this. And sometimes a kid, even though they really prefer their primary caretaker's caretaking, they will go with that parent to not get in trouble. Because if they align with that parent, because this parent is very black and white, and is saying things usually aggressively or asserting that the parent over here is wrong, that they've done all these things, and this is a form of parental alienation.
Wow.
And they're going to say a bunch of stuff to make that child believe them.
Mm.
And then they're also afraid to leave and even ask this parent anything. Like they're just
Yeah.
completely brainwashed, or they're just afraid they're going to get in trouble. So that's where I see them really split hard
Mm,
when they
yeah.
don't even participate in visitation.
Yeah.
There has to be some sort of pressure coming from somewhere. Something's happening,
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah. That's really interesting, isn't it? That they, that coercion, that they fearful of that parents. They say that because they're fearful of saying no to that parents. Yeah, gosh, that's very concerning, isn't it? Okay, yeah. And you talk a lot about the brilliantly. You talk a lot about, seeing things from the child's perspective and how you can kind of better attune yourself to the child. But you also talk a lot about attachment theory. And could you perhaps explain a little bit more details, Cathy, about how understanding attachment helps a rejected parent make sense of their child's behavior and then can start to rebuild that bond? Because I think it's a really important piece of theory there that you've included in your book.
I get it from a lot of different places. I do base it mainly in what's called EFFT, which is Adele France's EFFT, Emotion Focused Family Therapy, as opposed to Sue Johnson's Emotional Focused Family Therapy. And they know each other, or they did. I know Sue's passed on. Um, and they were amicable. But anyways, what Adele did is she took Gottman, and a lot of people know who Gottman is, or both of them, the family about family therapy, marriage therapy, but he also has a component about child therapy. And he had emotion coaching there. She took that and developed this emotion coaching model to help a parent with a child who maybe was having problems with eating disorders or school issues or just functioning in general, like a lower functioning kiddo. And there's a whole model of how to validate a child. So I'll talk about that a little bit and then go into the attachment. um, what I do is I use that because children need to be seen and heard. And if they don't feel like they're being
Mm,
seen and heard, then they're not feeling safe with their parent. So if I can teach a parent how to actively listen to their child, to validate their child and develop some empathy around their
mm,
child's perspective, that will help repair, sort
mm,
of answering probably two questions at the same time, probably repair the relationship easier by doing it that way, because the child will go, oh, you see me, oh, you understand me. Now I feel like I'm being seen or heard, and now I feel safe. So this attachment thing is when we have a parent who's been, you know, told that they're not going to be seeing a child, or the child refuses to see them, or is decreasing the amount of time they're seeing them, they're in the process of this. What's happening in that moment is whatever the parental attachment was, if there was one, sometimes there isn't. Honestly, I've run into those cases too, but most of the time there's something there where they felt safe at one point in the past, but something happened amongst this family law thing, and it created a rupture. Or maybe there was a rupture beforehand, and now the child's going, I'm going to sit here and I don't have to deal with you because of something happened 10 years ago. So they'll do stuff like that. And those are called ruptures. So what parents are for children, and partially a logo that I have is a soft, cushy chair. Parents are supposed to be the soft place for kids to land. So when
mm,
they feel hurt or scared or whatever in the world, they can come straight to that parent and
mm,
feel comforted and feel like everything's going to be okay no matter what happens out there in the world. But sometimes that that relationship gets ruptured, that gets broken up. So all of the cases I see, and I noticed this about, God, now it's been 7 or 8 or 9 years ago, that there's something more going on here than just me trying to do communication with a parent and a child in these cases. There was an actual attachment rupture that happened. So
mm.
something broke, just
Yeah.
something simply broke. And we need to repair that. And so by repairing that, we start that by validating where the child is right now, helping to understand how they felt when the parent left, how they feel that the parent's still gone. Why did they leave the house? I've even seen kids go, you left us. And I have to help them understand, well, one parent had to leave. They're in a divorce, right? So, I mean, that was a rupture, and it's something that this parent didn't do bad. It's just a rupture. They happen
Mm,
even without you trying. So attachment is the really safe base that they feel, and that attachment, that
mm,
connection you have with your child, emotional connection, where they come to you, they talk to you. But end of divorce or high custody dispute, this tends to cause a lot of ruptures. So
Yeah.
what I do again is I go in and we teach, or I teach validation basically, but I break it down because a lot of people don't understand it. You think it's simple, and I know some people said, "Oh, this is really simple. I could read this anywhere." Yeah, but I haven't seen anybody pull this in to this arena.
Mm.
And this is where we need to start working with these parents is this piece. And that's the beginning. And the rest is a whole different complicated process, but we have to start with that. I hope
Mhm.
that answered it. I
Yeah.
went sort of
No,
around it a
no,
bit.
no, you did. And I think you mentioned that's part of the emotional focused family therapy
Yeah,
as well. That kind of understanding that need to bond and to validate the child. That's also part of the emotion focused therapy.
right, right.
Attachment's
Because we
part of
develop
that.
script.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so to teach them how to validate, since they're like they're in their own silo and trauma and
Mm,
like I say, a burning building, and it's really hard for them to pay attention to what's going on out here. I give them something concrete to do,
mm.
and we like when I'm in therapy, we do a Google Doc together, for instance, and I give them a framework and we plug in each issue that I get from the kids, and then we address each one. I've got people that have 25 issues sometimes. The average is around 3 to 5. But kids will just start naming them off.
Good.
And yeah, but and I don't even ask them what don't you like about your parent? I don't do that. I take I wonder if I even have one over here. I do. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I'll do this. I have like a pen and I will go, abracadabra, poof, how would you change the primary caretaker parent or their house? And then I'll go abracadabra, poof, how would you change your parent that you don't want to see? I don't say it like that, or their house. And I sit here and get boom, 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 these lists of things. And that's where we get the material to work on with the kids' permission. We work
Yeah.
on that so even though something may have happened 5, 10 years ago, depending on the age of the child, or just last month, a parent can go and it's almost like going off in a time machine. And I'm going to say something nerdy. I love Doctor Who and the TARDIS. And I always picture a TARDIS, and we're going to go back into the TARDIS and we're going to go back in time. And we're going to go to that place, and the parent's going to show up in the way that the child needed them to then, now, and address it as if it's then, right? In
Yeah.
the present tense. And that doesn't take away the thing that happened, but what it does is it lets them come back to the cushy chair moment. It
Mm,
helps them see that
mm,
this parent really gets it. And we're all human, and parents make mistakes, and they can own their mistakes. They can take ownership of it. They can reassure them it's not going to happen in the future. They can apologize for it. They can do all the things and validate. There's a whole like formula to this, but validate first. And the
mm,
problem solving, that's at the end. Problem
mm,
solving's at the end. So that's the difference. It's sort of the less,
mm,
it's intuitive of parents to like go in and try to fix things for kiddos,
mm,
and they miss these opportunities of
mm.
attuning to their
Yes.
emotions and their
Attuning
emotional
and
state in that
validating.
moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I mean, with all your experience and the many, many people you've said, there's a lot of wisdom in what you say, a lot of experience you said. And if people, if parents just know what order to put it in, that can make a big difference, can't they? Okay, not to go in and argue and to be too factual problem solving. You have to get that emotional attunement right first so that the child feels safe, and then they're more able to repair the relationship. I think that's your point, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very good. Yeah, it's really good. And are there any kind of what I would say early warning signs that a child's been influencing at a parent doing a high conflict divorce or custody battle? Is there any kind of particular signs that you notice?
There is. And it's rare that I get cases during that period of time. Usually people come to me way too late, like 6 months or later after things have already happened. But
Oh,
at any point when a child goes, yeah, I feel like going to your house today, or I don't like what you cook, or, I like mommy's bed better. Things like that, and the kid hasn't totally rejected and they're still coming over, if they're still at your house and they're complaining about your house, let's take a look at what's going on in your house. Let's try to see if the co-parenting relationship needs to be improved, which usually that's what it is. And those are little things. Anytime they're complaining about you or your house or something you do that's different from the other parent, that is big, big time red flags. that you're going down the path. Because if you ignore it,
mm,
minimize it, deny it, scold them, punish them for wanting to see the other parent, talk to the other parent, or like something different with the other parent, you have now done your own rejection. And I guarantee, I'm not going to guarantee anything, but I can almost guarantee you every case I know of will end up in this place that I wrote my book for, because that is usually what happens. You've got a kid that's all they're trying to do is try to make sense of their parents splitting up, and they're trying to make sense of how is this going to work in their lives, because it is about them at these ages, and they're trying to adjust and try to understand everything, right? So if you start putting pressure on them and getting panicky because you think they're leaving, you're actually going to push them away.
mm,
So you want to catch that and get help immediately,
mm,
is what I would say.
mm,
That would be helpful with someone who understands attachment, because that's the problem, is attachment
mm,
at that moment, most likely.
mm, mm. And one of my bugbears is we don't learn these things at school. We don't learn how to be a parent or understand how to be a good parent as well. It's sort of assumed that we know all this as well. Whereas these are really good, important skills that an adult ideally should have, but it's not necessarily the case, is it? People haven't been taught or don't know how to communicate with children unless they've got a very good role model in their parents. But if they haven't, how do they learn these skills? There's a big gap there. So yeah, I think your book covers so many natural parental skills as well. Parents in general can kind of benefit from that. Okay, so so if we perhaps look at maybe a parent facing rejection right now, um, I know you've already mentioned the validating and the listening, the rapport. Is there anything else they can do on a practical level to rebuild trust with their child?
It is really basic stuff. I mean, when I tell people that come to me like after 2 or 3 years of not seeing their kiddo and they don't have it, they've have been cut off completely. The only thing I can do, because I can't wave another magic wand and make this
Mm,
door open to seeing their kid, but what I say is that you want to look for those windows of time, because there's more than people think. They get all shut down, but you want to develop an understanding or try to think at what is it, how did this happen? And if I hear the words, it's my co-parent, that's not all true ever in my experience.
yeah.
I'm not saying that co-parents aren't influencing, and there's that issue, right? But it's not always true. So if there is an aspect of you, and even if it is true, there's an aspect that you can do. So when the little windows of time open, like let's say you're allowed to go to a graduation and you can sit in the bleachers, but you can't go down and greet your kiddo because you haven't had contact for a while. You can write a letter of saying all the things you're proud of them. You can reach to them and say, I'm here for you whenever you need me. I would love to have contact with you, but not in a guilt trippy way. There's a
Mm,
way to write that,
mm,
right?
yeah.
You can write
Yeah.
letters, you can send texts. Yeah, because guilt trips tend to, yeah, sometimes we come across as guilt trippy
Mm,
when we're desperate and wanting to see our kids. Um, you can send a text saying, I was here, I'm very proud of you. Sometimes kids block people. They're getting worse and worse about this, or it's happening more and more, where kids are blocking their parents and the co-parent lets it happen or doesn't pay attention and it's just
mm,
happening. So I think letters, and then keeping a
mm,
duplicate copy of that letter if you're going to
mm,
send one, and make it all positive. It better be validating,
mm,
supportive, open door, come and talk to me anytime you want. I'd love to have lunch with you, that type of thing. I would be sending things like that off to a kiddo every once in a while,
mm,
not every day, not
mm,
every week, if it's been a long time.
mm,
And be prepared if you have that window of opportunity to actually see your kid, that you can say something like, "Oh, it's so nice to see you. I'm so I've missed you, and I love you, and I'm here for you anytime you need me."
yeah.
And that doesn't feel like a lot, but it does disarm a child who is like bracing themselves
Mm,
when they have to see you once or something like that.
mm,
Like let's say you start supervised visitation and you haven't done that yet, but it's been a minute. Like I've seen parents who haven't seen their kid for a year, and all of a sudden supervised visitation's happening. I'm like, okay, that's hard, because really therapy should happen first. That's my opinion,
mm,
because you're not allowed to talk about issues in supervised visitation, and there's herds of elephants in the room. So, but anyways, you can just say positive things. So I'm so happy to see you, like I said, and be positive about them and how proud you are. And you could talk about happy memories or stuff like that that you used to have with them.
Mm.
So I hope that makes sense. There's not a lot you
Yeah,
can do when the door's
yeah,
shut,
yeah,
but you can send letters and keep a
yeah,
duplicate so you
yeah.
have it for later.
Mm. But to have hope and because it's such a sensitive area, that I'm sure the parent is terrified of doing or saying the wrong thing, and and probably has lots of anger and frustration and everything that you talk about. The parent regulating themselves before they speak to the child as well, and you share the regulation with the child. You mentioned that, but like you say, it's moving away from all that feeling and negative emotions and actually just being giving that pure love and praise to that child. That's a really good thing to do, isn't it? That's a really good
Right.
answer. And people can,
Right.
yeah,
And
you can do that. I
oh,
can do that.
yeah. Sometimes I tell them I do this now when we have a kiddo who's older. I go, before you come into session with us, you need to do something to ground yourself, and then I will teach them things. There's, different meditations and guided visualizations or deep breathing or just even going for a run or some sort of exercise if they can do such a thing. And then I tell them to get a picture if they have it or to try to remember the when at the youngest age they remember what it felt like to see their baby look up at them and coo at them and really try to engage with that, because if
Mm,
they can get in that space, then they will naturally just viscerally, like in their body,
mm,
show up in our first session or contact with that child in a way that's not this bracing, I've got a teenager I'm going to go in that's going to shout at me, or I don't know what's going to happen, anxiety or their own angst about being angry at not being able to see their kid. They need to refocus themselves on what it was like the last time it was really, really a truly positive, parental love with that child.
mm. And that's sort of reactivating that secure attachment bond as well, isn't it? It's going back
Right.
to that feeling of absolute devotion and love and attachment. That's what I feel when you say that, and the child feels that then, don't they? They feel that love that you have for your child when you first see them for the first time. It's amazing. Yeah, yeah, and again, that's doable, isn't it? I can see a
Yeah.
parent being, yeah, okay, I know what to do now. I can re-engage with that feeling, and then it comes across so much better when they actually see the
Right.
child. Yeah, yeah, it's good
And
stuff.
I think one of the reason why I said duplicate the letter is sometimes letters get ripped up, but you will now, if you take a picture of it, write an original, take a picture, whatever, screenshot if you want, or copy it, keep it in a drawer, save it. Everything that you give your child, send to them. If you can afford it, even if it's a small gift, get another one and save it. Because I've read this somewhere. This wasn't my idea, but I thought it was so clever. I told a parent to devote a closet to their kiddo because I've seen cases where kids have completely said no way to a parent at a younger age and they come back around in their 20s or 30s. It does happen, not always, but if you kept all your stuff that you gave them in case it got thrown out, then you've
Mm,
got this beautiful memory and they can see that you've been thinking of them for this whole time.
mm,
And it's not
wonderful.
about guilt tripping them. See what I did? No, 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 no. See, I've been thinking of you the whole time. And it's
Wow,
almost like evidence of it, but not to say
beautiful.
court evidence,
Yeah,
Yeah.
evidence of love and thoughtfulness and belonging and everything like that, and yeah, that's such a good, yeah, like you say, you can see the child perhaps in adolescence like that, rejecting and burning and tearing it all up and everything like that, and
Yeah.
then later on regretting that and feeling sad about that. That's a
Right.
beautiful idea. I love that. And it can
Yeah.
make the parent feel good because they can
You do.
show them, look how much I thought about you, and how much I loved you, and you can have these now. I want to show
It
you.
makes you feel like you're doing something.
Yeah.
And I can't guarantee it's going to work, but when it does, oh, I've heard of these things working before and it's really beautiful. So
Mm. I think it's a
if
great
it
thing for
does,
any parent to do, but I'm just yeah, really good. Yeah,
right.
yeah. And you also mentioned in the book that what I understand happens is a child has a narrative of what's going on, and it's their narrative, about how the family broke down. And I think sometimes those narratives are not accurate. They're the child's interpretations of things. So how would a rejected parent sort of deal with that kind of difficult situation, would you say?
That's why I went into the emotions. Like if you focus less on the details of what the child's saying happened, and I know it's difficult if you're getting sexual abuse or physical abuse allegations thrown at you that didn't happen, because that does happen, but it also sexual and physical abuse allegations are actually true sometimes too, just to say that. But what I tell people to do is you want to focus on the emotions. You don't argue facts with a kid.
Mm,
Children's brain development isn't like advanced enough to interpret what's going on, even in teenage years sometimes.
mm,
Um, but the young kids, they have their own, their little brains are limited on how they can understand what's going on. So they're trying to piece it together, and they have influence from the kids on the blacktop, so to speak. So the kids out on recess or at school have their own divorce experiences because there's a high level of divorce in the world. And so the chances that they have a friend that has parents that are divorced so is high. So that's why we go with the emotions, because it used to be we used to try to talk about, well, really, were there any marks when you're giving, an allegation? Or we might try to talk around it to try to help the child see, like, where did this come from, or try to ask questions. But instead of challenging that narrative and getting into like a total rabbit hole and going down into a dark pit of you're never going to win that argument because they're convinced, you just want to talk about their feelings, about how they're feeling about this whole experience, and try to get at what they're needing differently and try to bring them into now, right? But then again, there's that, and then there's the narrative that happens when you've got a co-parent, or I will say extended family, friends on the laptop. I almost said laptop because I have a laptop in front of me, that are telling them things that happen in divorce. I had a kid who was completely convinced that there's going to be domestic violence, or they're going to get hit, when no one had ever hit anybody in their house, because their best friend saw the police come, and this is what happens in a divorce, and their daddy hit their mommy, and now they're afraid their mommy's going to hit their daddy, or their daddy's going to hit their mommy, and this all gets messed up. So we want to get it like where this is coming from, right? And then try to talk about the feelings around how hard it is to be in separate homes and start talking about that stuff, if that makes sense. I mean,
mm.
yeah. And then
It does
sometimes
make sense.
too, when kids have been on programs, sometimes this happens, and they've been overheard stuff from extended family members or their own parent. I think I read somewhere that you can tell a kid a lie 3 times and it becomes fact in their head. So you can't argue when they trust one parent or one extended family member or a friend or
Mm,
something. You can't argue with them on that. You just work around it. We don't want to attack that at
mm,
all. And sometimes when it's not true, it fades away.
mm,
So if we deal with the emotions, if we go with understanding a child's emotions around whatever it is they're complaining about or they're concerned about, that's how that stuff sort of goes away,
mm,
right? That's why we don't deal with child's narrative, because
mm,
it's almost never accurate,
mm. Interesting. Yeah.
just from the brain development even.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like I said,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the points that you make in your book is, you need to understand the developmental age of your child. Because again, a mistake people make is they become too adult, or they give them adult information like the court information or the papers, and that's too overwhelming for that child. Their brain's not ready for it, and that can be very distressing to them as well. So I think you're really trying to attune them to understand the know the age of the child and the emotional development of the child, and sort of speak to that kind of that area where they are at, so that people understand it differently. I think that's a really good point that you make. It's easy to
right.
forget that, isn't it? um
It is.
People
It is.
unintentionally tell little children facts, and this is that and everything like that, but that in itself is, like you say, it just doesn't suit their brain at that time.
Just knowing the court date can send them into anxiety or fear about what's going to happen. And almost always, I've noticed, almost, there's no absolutes in anything, but it's just a lot of the time, children will take on the burden of one of two things. If they know too much information and, or they have to, don't even get me started about putting kids on the stand. I think that's the worst thing you could ever do to a child in family law case or dependency. But they feel responsible for the outcome, or they feel responsible that it
Mm,
happened. So, and they feel this, I see kids go through depression and anxiety symptoms that they wouldn't have had if they hadn't been burdened with this adult information. And
mm,
I'm even saying in teenage years,
mm,
I might even argue, why the heck do you even need to ever share when your children go into their 20s or 30s any detail about what happened between the two of you? Because it's a parental thing any more than you would, and I'm sorry for being a little graphic, but it's not going to be graphic, but any more than telling them details about what you did in the bedroom with
mm.
your other parent before you split up. You don't give kids that information.
No.
It's just it's inappropriate and it's not age appropriate, right? It would be a boundary violation
Mm,
anyways. But you don't want to give kids this information. They never have to
mm,
know that there was an affair. That
mm,
doesn't serve them. So the rule of thumb I tell people is if it's going to create a positive reaction in a child or it's going to help them develop or do something positive with them, okay, tell them that. I can't think of very many things, right? But if it's going to not give them anything and it's just about you wanting to let them know about the other parent, then that I guarantee you,
mm,
you're going to put a burden on your kid that they don't need at
mm.
any age. I don't care what the age
Yeah.
is.
That's really good stuff. That's really wise, isn't it? Because I can imagine a lot of parents making that mistake and thinking they're explaining things or things like that. But like you say, that emotional burden on that child and them thinking responsible is what happens. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very good advice. Brilliant advice. And we've talked quite a lot about, co-parenting. It is really difficult. There's a lot of conflict. Separation is very difficult. Um, so how can parents navigate together to protect their child from being caught in the middle? Any kind of advice on that, Cathy?
Sure. I mean, I know that again, I deal with high conflict divorce because most of the time my
Mm,
parents that I'm working with are not talking to each other. And if they are, they're
mm,
in combat mode. So what I suggest, and one of the best ways to do this, I think, is using a co-parenting app. And I'm not an advertisement for all the ones out there, but there's a bunch. And some of them are starting to get filters on there so you don't accidentally say something nasty to your co-parent. But I think keeping containing information. So when you communicate with your co-parent, do it over an app and have a calendar on there for them so you know when the kid's schedule is so you can minimize your communication
mm,
outside of that app and try to keep everything there. And then if you don't want to be notified by the app, turn off your notifications and just look at it from time to time and set up a protocol that if there's an emergency for the child, like they went to the hospital or an accident happened or something, or they're really sick, then you can text each other. This is assuming there's no restraining orders involved.
yeah.
But even with restraining orders, if there's some co-parenting or parallel parenting going on, which usually restraining orders, a lot of times there's just one parent having the child custody, not always, but sometimes. You want to just keep the communications there. If you're doing exchanges with each other, like in a parking lot or picking or dropping off kids at each other's homes, that is the time that you do not talk. Don't even talk about the weather. Don't just say hello.
Mm,
If you're going to say anything, just say hello. Don't talk about schedules, the next week, a birthday party, grades. I don't care what it is. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it because any type of communication could spark an argument, could spark some sort of, rubbing against each other. And then you
mm,
do that in front of your child, it causes a lot of emotional burden on them. So keep all of your communications away from your child so they don't witness it either.
mm,
Even if it's just simple. Hey, so and so's birthday party is on Saturday. Do you want me to take them or are you going to take them? That could start a really big blow up. Do it on the app. Don't do it in
mm,
front of the child. Don't transition should be a peaceful time where you lovingly say goodbye to your child or say hello to your child, and you keep them sheltered from this and you
mm,
minimize your contact during that time. So
mm,
that's one way that's like a huge thing that I see in my
mm.
cases.
Again,
Happens.
excellent advice, you know, excellent advice. And it must be so hard for that child to see their parents arguing again, the distress that must cause them. It must be, immense and bring up all kinds of stuff as well. I love that idea. It's just a very peaceful transition, it's just hello and get on with it. And all the communication is done by the app. I think you said in high conflict, but I can see that in many situations anyway, just normal situations. If it's not high conflict, just make sure you don't have those arguments in front of the children. Yeah, yeah, it's
Or
really good advice.
discussions, right?
Yeah,
Discussions,
yeah,
conversations.
yeah.
It
Which,
just, it's very risky.
yeah,
It's very risky.
yeah,
And you may think you're just fine and you feel great, and then but the kid is picking up on the tension.
mm,
Children feel it. I've
mm,
known
mm,
like
they do.
infants going under some stress response because of fighting in the house.
Mm,
And people go, oh, kids are kids. They're resilient. They'll get over it. They're fine. No, they're not.
mm.
And they don't understand it cognitively, but in their body, they're
They
feeling
feel
it.
it.
And it's
They feel it.
causing them physical stress
Mm,
when they have to witness their parents arguing or communicating when there's that cold tension,
mm,
even though no one raised their voice.
mm.
So that's why I
They
make it
still
a
pick it
rule.
up.
Yeah, in my practice, for instance, I don't allow parents to be in the same room with the children at the same time when I'm working with them. So I actually either separate, I have whoever has the child that day brings them in the waiting room and gets to be there, and the other parent has to be in their car. Or if I have an office, which I'm about to have, I'm crossing fingers that I'll be able to have a second waiting room so I can have the other parent come in and actually sit and wait so they're not in the same room.
Mm,
Because even if they didn't say a word and sat there in silence, the child is going to feel tension and get upset
mm, mm,
most of the time,
mm. Interesting.
young and
Yeah,
old.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Good again. Good advice. Very good advice. Yeah. Um. So let's talk a little bit about reconciliation now, because um, it can happen after estrangement, after many, many years. It's still possible you can actually have some reconciliation there. Um, so if that was to happen, what would realistic progress look like, and how on earth do you keep parents hopeful without losing patience towards reconciliation if they've been split for such a long time?
It's so hard, right? So what I say is we don't know what's going to happen. And your child may a lot of times, and I'm not saying every time because I've seen it go both ways, but I've seen a few cases where kids get to 18, they either move out somewhere their late teens or early 20s, hopefully, they start to become independent because that's healthy for them. They go to college or they go to a trade school or they just move out on their own and get a job. When that happens and they're moving away from the one parent that was sort of, there was something about that home that was helping to keep that child away from you, that's when they wake up and sometimes they'll go, I don't know why I'm not seeing the other parent anymore. Like they'll just their brain just shifted. And
Mm,
we talk about brain development a few times here.
mm,
But when you get past 18 and you start moving closer and closer to 25, at 25 our brains are supposedly mostly developed or all fully as developed as they're going to be. They're
mm,
always changing and there's neuroplasticity and there's ways of changing and healing, but we're developed by then. So a lot of times around that age group, anywhere
mm,
from like 20, early 20s to mid 20s, kids have a tendency to revisit. This is about the time when a child is, for instance, adopted and they don't know their birth parents, they go looking for them,
mm,
right? So this is when that might happen. And so that's the hope I give parents. Like if you keep showing up, even if you're not able to be at a graduation, you celebrate it, you send a letter, you celebrate birthdays, you send them Christmas presents, or whatever you celebrate Christmas, whatever the presents are, Easter, Hanukkah, whatever it
mm,
is, If you continue those rituals you did and you keep showing up, then you don't give them a reason to say that that you weren't
Mm,
ever there for them,
mm,
right? So you have a
mm,
higher chance of them wanting to circle back around and check in with you
mm,
and maybe decide for themselves.
mm,
Maybe they've forgotten some of the stuff
mm,
because we do have our memories sort of prune as we get older. We don't remember a lot of our childhood
mm,
sometimes. So you have a higher chance, and then you may be given a window of time. And if you're
mm,
given that window of time and you have a few phrases in your back pocket, like, again, exactly what I said earlier, I'm so glad to see you. It's been a minute, and I'm really happy to see you. Would you be interested in going to lunch or dinner sometime? I'm here for you anytime you need me.
mm,
Just that.
mm,
That is so key to opening the door a little bit,
mm,
maybe opening a window, you know, and giving them that invitation that
mm,
you've always been there without the guilt and
mm,
without the angst
mm.
and
That's
the
important.
threats.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
that's
don't
really,
want to do that. And
yeah,
never throw the other parent under the bus. Never.
yeah,
Never say negative things about the other parent, even
yeah,
if they were fully responsible for what happened. You don't want to do that,
yeah.
right? Because it's their parent. They love their parent. You don't
Mm,
want to do that.
mm.
Even if the other parent does it, don't do it.
Yeah,
Take the high ground.
yeah,
Want to take the high ground. So
yeah. Good
that's the
advice.
way that I see, because I talk about a story in my book of David, and that 10 years he went without seeing his kiddos, and not allowed to see his kiddos. They didn't want to see him. But he went to every graduation. He sent Easter baskets or Christmas stockings, birthday presents, cards, letters, and he didn't do it to nag them and inundate them, overwhelm them, but he kept those things going, and he was always there.
Mm,
So they can't say, and they couldn't say, that he wasn't there for all those moments in their history that
mm,
were so important,
mm,
right?
mm,
So, and then it opened the door. Slowly, it took a minute.
mm.
He just was open and listened and validated. And then he was just open and validated and tried to repair that soft chair that he was at one point, so they could come back and that could be a soft landing. And there's still, this has been like 10 years post that time that I know this, some of these particular cases, this is like someone, out there. And it's still working. So it can be done.
Yeah, I
It
think it
can be
gives
done.
people hope as well, doesn't it? That they can
Yeah.
do something about it, even if they can't see their child by, you know, I can show my love this way. I am still here and I'm still thinking
Yeah.
about you. So something really practical about following that kind of idea of showing up and posting things to them as well, and also keeping a copy so that they can show them, like you say, even if they didn't get them or something like that, they can show them all the stuff that they gave them over the years. It's lovely
Yeah.
practical stuff that somebody can do. And sometimes it's the thought, isn't it? It's not the expense necessary. It's just the thinking of the love and the attention and remembering their birthdays and all that type of thing. Yeah, yeah, it's really good. Yeah. And I know you also work really closely with family law attorneys and therapists on these cases. What do you think is the biggest misunderstanding professionals and courts still have about parental alienation and child-centered care? What's the biggest
Yeah, in our
misunderstanding?
courts down here, I'm in San Diego, we're really not allowed to talk about parental alienation and say that phrase too much, from what I understand. Maybe it's changing. There's a lot of heavy feelings about that phrase. There's black and white thinking on that phrase. Um, and it's really a bunch of gray area anyways. So I think that there isn't a lot of training that they're trying, and I know down here we're trying to do training to help attorneys and judges understand these things, and therapists, that there's these, again, nuanced dynamics, and they're very complicated when there's a child not wanting to see a parent, or just how do you do custody orders that's child-centered, and that's not even really a conversation yet in our family law courts. I wish it was. Sometimes we have minors counsel that are appointed, and they try to do and make suggestions in the best interest of the child, but even sometimes some minors counsel are a little bit not getting the developmental stages and what a kiddo needs. I love how some judges, and I'm just going to say courts, it's not individual judges, it's just the system.
Mm,
Because, we have lovely people trying to do the best they can with what they have, right? So maybe some don't, but a lot of them do. They mean well, but they only go with what they know. And that would be a good point. Like if they were raised a certain way, they're human beings. And so
mm,
bench officers, judges, attorneys, and other therapists involved in cases, if they haven't been trained, they're gonna, you know, approach things the way they know personally in their own childhood. So I have trainings and stuff that I've done down here in San Diego Family Law Bar Association to try to help family law professionals, staff to understand the needs of the children. Like maybe, 50-50 may not be the thing to do all the time. We all know this about nursing babies, but there is some kids, some diagnoses of kids, some situations that maybe it just doesn't work. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. Why do you put a child in daycare at under 10? Let's talk about under 10 because that's a little bit more delicate. Put a child in daycare under 10 in the afternoon because you got a 50-50 week on, week off split. And the one parent is has a flexible schedule and could be picking that child up from school like they always did. But because it's not their week, they're not allowed to. Why are we putting kids in daycare with strangers when we've got a perfectly able parent here?
mm,
So does that mean that we're trying to reduce transitions? Well, I would argue, okay, yeah, let's reduce transitions. Maybe that week on, week off model isn't working for this age group or this particular child. And what if we had a way to reduce the transitions and have the one parent pick the child up from school all the time? What's wrong with that? And what if we just tweak the custody schedule in a different way to give the other parent time? I mean, it's just not realistic for a kid to stay in daycare from like 2:30 to 5 or 6 o'clock at night just
mm,
because we've got one person working across the county and they can't pick them up. They shouldn't be penalized, but
mm,
really, it's not their time. A stranger is taking care of your kids during that time. So I'm trying to help them, well, help, in some of my trainings understand that
mm,
type of thing. Like that's an example.
mm,
Like that's for the sake of the title 50-50. That's not really
mm,
50-50 anyways.
mm,
Why, I think that there should be the first right of refusal on everything. And that if a parent's available, the parent should be taking care of a child, not daycare,
mm, mm,
for instance. So that's a child-centered
mm,
way of looking at it. What does the
mm,
kid need? The kid doesn't want to be in daycare
mm,
at a young age, usually. So maybe some of them do. Maybe you've got like a real fancy daycare in a fancy area that's really cool. Okay. But I've seen too many situations like that, that it just was for the sake of keeping it 50-50 in
mm,
a certain locked way that wasn't flexible. And then
yeah.
and then having a custody schedule that's not changeable as they grow. I'm watching the courts now starting to do that. They're starting to say, okay, well, you might have to come back and readjust this as the child's needs change. And I love that when I hear
My
a
God.
court doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, just
really
being
nice.
more child-centered, more flexible, and really
Mhm.
understanding those dynamics is I think your point, isn't it? Rather than being so fixated on this, it must be 50-50 and we must stick to that like glue. And it doesn't actually serve the parents or the child. Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot more to work to be done. And there you are battling away, Cathy, just trying to solve all these issues. And I think your book can apply to so many people. I think it's very educational professionals, people like myself who work with parents who may have lost contact with their children, or parents who are divorcing and are trying to navigate all that, but also for parents themselves. Like you say, the rejected parent, I can see this being such an amazing toolbox for them to really feel as though they are, they can do things in a way which is really helpful, and they don't make the mistakes which actually make things much worse. So it's a very useful resource for both professionally but also personally, I think, in my opinion. So thank you for the effort you put into writing that. It's a great piece of work. So thank you
I'm
for that.
hoping it's preventative for people in these
That would be really
cases. Yeah.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah, I've
really
had people
nice.
go, gosh, I wish I knew you 5, 10, 20 years ago. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah,
it is
that's the
preventative.
parents I'm
Yeah,
trying to reach. So
yeah,
they
I
don't
get
make
that.
the mistakes that I lay out in the book. It just it's so easy to do the things that get done
Mm,
in these cases because
mm,
we're again in our little silos, burning buildings, and we're just trying to survive the moment. And a lot of times kids' feelings and perspectives and needs are not being taken into accountability because there's just so much fighting going on
Mm,
in the background.
mm,
So much. And so much is survival mode
mm.
going on for parents.
And then the child has more trauma, and then you see them as an adult, and you have to deal with the trauma of their child, and the joy of being a child and the lost childhood is also will affect them as well, won't they? Because there's things that they didn't need to go through that sort of trauma or that sadness, that conflict, if it was handled better in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. So if anyone wants to order your copy, we will put a link in the show notes so people will be able to order the copy from there. But if people want to actually get in touch with you, Cathy, they might have some questions for you, they might be interested in your services. How's the best way to contact you?
Sure. I mean, they can just, I have an email, Cathy, Cathy at HimlinConsulting.com, or you can go on my website, HimlinConsulting.com, and that's Himlin, Himlin, consulting.com. And then that's where there's some, well, there's all kinds of things on there. It's directed, and I get teased by some providers, not providers as in what do you call it? Service providers that help you put up platforms. They're like, "Well, what's your client?" I said, "I've got three clients. I've got parents, attorneys, and therapists. Those are my clients
Yeah,
because it's a wraparound. We all have to understand what we're doing to
yeah,
help these parents, and the parents need to understand what to do to help their kids. So it's just a whole, I don't like to call it holistic, but it's like almost a holistic approach that I'm trying
yeah.
to take
I,
to
I
support
see
kids.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's necessary, absolutely. And all
yeah.
those information will also be in the show notes as well. So if you didn't hear that, you can go back to the show notes and contact Cathy that way. So I
Thank
just
you.
want to thank you, Cathy, for how generous you've been sharing your wisdom about this subject. And I really do hope people reach out and listen to your wise words and actually feel so much better if they have a problem with their child through divorce or separation. That would be such a wonderful piece of work if they follow your 30 years of advice working that area and they start to repair and reconcile with their child. So thank you so much for your generosity of your information.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you everybody for listening. I really appreciate you taking time to listen to this. It's really good stuff. And if you like the channel, please subscribe. I really would appreciate that. Thank you so much.